With that 1-0 advantage. For more, let's welcome in, shall we? Stewart Robson joins us. We'll be hearing from Robbo in a moment. But Craig, overall, just a better team. PSG in the end?
Slightly on the night. I mean, Arsenal wore back into it as the game went on. We saw Aston Villa do that to PSG a little bit, so that's a little warning for them when teams get at them. But I think particularly the first 35 minutes, there was two teams that wanted to pass the ball and two teams that wanted to press the ball. And PSG did both of those things better. Their pressing was more intense and Arsenal struggled to handle it. Their passing was slick, it was fast, it was incisive. And they, again, looked the real deal.
Yeah. And
yes, Thomas Partey's going to be coming back from suspension. That'll be a boost and a bolster to the midfield. But this PSG side at home, I think, are going to have another off day if this Arsenal team are going to win. They're not out of it. They are not out of it, and they did create chances. And Moreno will probably play further up when Partey comes into the midfield. But this PSG team are slick, and I think in the first 35 minutes, we saw that.
Yeah, that's the point. They kind of set the tone of that whole match, didn't they, within that opening half an hour?
It was impressive how comfortable and confident they were with the possession of the ball. And it was a possession of the ball that they took all over the field. The sequence for the goal, Ousmane Dembele, starts really at the back. And Arsenal think, well, we're pinning PSG back, we're pressing them, we're getting numbers around the ball. Their ability to ignore the crowd, to ignore the energy, and to just focus on execution. And the passing game that Craig is talking about, in order for it to be slick, you have to have a whole lot of confidence and you have to have a whole lot of quality to be able to do so. That this evening, this stadium, all the surrounding that you have seen some teams haven't been able to deal with at PSG. We saw them deal with that at Anfield and we saw them deal with that again today. Able to pass the ball as they wanted to, certainly in the first half. Second half got a little different, but the first half, those first 30 minutes, lights out from PSG.
And it's interesting because it was all about that first 30 minutes going into the game, Robert, because we saw Arteta on TikTok trying to get all the fans together to build up a European night that wouldn't be forgotten for Arsenal. Yet if you can't do it on the pitch, the fans don't have anything to cheer about.
No, you can't just keep having the players trying to whip the crowd up and the manager trying to whip the crowd up. You whip the crowd up by winning the ball back in good areas. You get the crowd going by playing around the pressure. And as the two guys in the studio have just said, Arsenal didn't do that particularly well and PSG did it much better. PSG's passing in that first half, and it was the work rate of the three midfield players, not over from box to box, but those 10-yard runs to get away from their marker, to play the next ball one touch, one round the corner, to play the right pass. The weight of the passing, the movement of the players, knowing where the next pass was, Arsenal couldn't cope with that in the first 35 minutes. And that was the big problem for Arsenal. They were totally outplayed in that first 30 minutes.
You look at someone like Scalia as well, who just adds that attacking threat, that extra bit of quality. And Dembele, we've talked so much about, who's in contention for the Ballon d'Or, getting a goal on a big night again.
Yeah, big performance from him in terms of his goal. Scalia wasn't as much of a threat in the second half, but the first half, just a big threat. Barkley can come on. You know, there's just so many. I mean, these numbers, we've obviously watched a lot of him, particularly at Dortmund and then Barca and now PSG. And what he's doing now is just total consistency. Something that he didn't have before. He was, late for training. He was having these disciplinary issues. He was going through on these one-on-ones and the ball wasn't even coming close to the target most of the time. He's really cleaned all those up. And when we talk about big players performing, I don't know what the guys think, but when we talk a lot about Martin Odegaard, and he's a tidy, clever player that can pick a defence apart. But generally I'm seeing him do that, certainly at times this season, not so much in the big games. In the games that Arsenal dominate and, against the weaker teams in the Premier League, he sometimes looks lights out. But when I watch him in games like this, against this, as Robbo mentioned, this quality midfield, all similar size to Odegaard apart from Fabian Ruiz, all really tidy on the ball, nobody over physical. For me, at the moment, he's not doing enough in these big games. It was Declan Rice that was driving them forward. It was Declan Rice that was getting on the ball. It was Moreno that was getting in the box. Yeah, he had some tidy passes. But when we're talking about big players, I don't quite think Martin Odegaard, and maybe that's one of the reasons, as good a player as he is, that Real Madrid said, no, we don't think you're quite good enough here. And I think he has to have a bigger game in Paris. And also when PSG press, William Saliba and Kivior do not look comfortable. They do not look as comfortable as Pacho and Marquinhos. They look really nervous when PSG presses. Saliba's made a couple of mistakes recently on the ball in the Premier League where he's been caught. He got away with a couple tonight. And so there's a lot of thinking to do for Arsenal in this second leg. But they have to get their big players on the ball. And that includes Martin Odegaard, who really, I think, didn't affect the game tonight.
A couple of points about Dembele for a second. Injured today.
So came off in the second half.
We don't know exactly what that will be and if indeed he'll be available. But assuming that he's available, it's hard to understand, as former players ourselves, how his skill set didn't quite work out in wide areas. And when he comes now underneath or is playing in a central area, it seems to be where, for some odd reason, now he's playing at his highest level. His skill set tells you he's a 1v1 player. His skill set tells you he's going to run by people and he's going to be effective doing that, which he was able to do when he's playing in wide areas, but there was no final product. Now you're looking at a guy who's a playmaker and a guy who drops underneath, who drives at people in crowded areas instead of looking for space, and somehow that's the best of Ousmane Dembele. Look, I would have failed miserably coaching this guy because I would have played him out on the side time and time again. Somehow Luis Enrique has found this role for Ousmane Dembele, and he seems to be getting the best out of Dembele consistently, to your point, Craig, which nobody else has. Nobody else has been able to do this. So if indeed he's not available, that's a big miss. As for Martin Odegaard, what I would say is not enough passing the ball forward. Yeah. Penetrating passes. To your point about...
Is that because there isn't a number 9 to link up to? Are we going all the way around?
Yeah, well, okay, but you can find a penetrating pass to Martinelli, which Luis Skelly did. You can find a penetrating pass on the other side to Leandro Trossard. You can find a penetrating pass to, at the very least, move PSG back, and then you can get the ball back, and then you can start playmaking in an advanced position. But what I see from him, it's the comfortable pass back, the comfortable sideways. Find Bukayo Saka in behind. Those spaces are there. And you know why those spaces are there? Because Nuno Mendes likes to go. Because Hakimi likes to go. And when they go, there are spaces available for Arsenal. But to your point, Craig, it is Declan Rice that creates that space for Leandro Trossard because he ran past the midfield of PSG. We don't see Odegaard either passing past that pressure or running by that pressure. Too comfortable passing the ball sideways and back.
He's got a big, he's part of it. I prefer over Martin, no, not Odegaard. Fabian Ruiz has been around for a while, but Vitinha and João Neves are excellent. In the modern game, you'd say they're not going to be able to cut the mustard at elite level. They're not big enough, they're not strong enough, they're not the quickest. The modern game demands all those, skill sets, but no, because they're clever. Yeah. They're clever. They're very good on the ball. They're clever. They take up good space. They're aware of what's around them when they get on the ball. If it needs to be played forward, they play it forward. If it needs to go back to Marquinhos, it goes back. At the moment, and Arsenal have been strong in midfield all season, and they'll be a bit stronger, or they should be when Partey comes back for the second leg. But you would say at the moment that this PSG midfield, which is really the engine room of this side, is stronger than Arsenal right now.
How much can you offer up the fact that Partey obviously was suspended for this tie, for that happening, Robbo?
Well, it does then mean that Declan Rice can play that little bit further forward. So that gives them a little bit more momentum, I would say, in front areas. He can make runs into the box as well and get on the end of crosses. Partey is a good defensive player. I don't think he's a wonderful passer of the ball. But as the two guys have said, Odegaard isn't penetrating enough at the moment. And with the two chances they had, which Ali said, one is Declan Rice picks up the ball and runs past midfield players, so it opens up space. Hakimi was caught high up the field on that occasion. And the second one, when Luis Skelly gets the one, he turns his man and now's driving towards the goal. So you can then pick another pass out. That's what Odegaard has to do. But I don't think he's got the capabilities because he's not athletic enough. He's not dynamic enough when he gets half a yard to beat people. The only player that can do that in the front areas is obviously Martinelli can do it, but doesn't do it consistently. Saka was the danger whenever he got on the ball.
Robbo, what could have Arteta done differently today?
Well, I think they got caught up in that first 30 minutes. Do we press the ball? Do we drop off? But they didn't do it. He didn't do it very well. You know, when you're playing against a very good side, you've got to make it difficult for them to play. And that sometimes means, yeah, you let them have the ball, but you force them into certain areas. So you know how to defend from that sort of area if it goes to the left back. They made a couple of different things. If I was on the sidelines, I'd have been saying to Timber, don't go on the straight angle to Kvaratskhelia, because every time that ball gets played, we've locked them in, they play the ball down the side, he's only going to take his touch infield. His right foot, he's going to take his touch inside. And he committed 3 or 4 fouls and let PSG out. That when Arsenal actually pressed the ball quite well. So that was one area they had a problem. And they didn't pick up players that went short, as Dembele did for the goal, and they did it about 4 times in the game when it went out to Mendes on the left-hand side, when they look as though they got it locked in, and he played that sort of diagonal ball, and a midfield player or Dembele dropped that little bit deeper and found that bit of space. So there are 1 or 2 things that I think Arteta could have done a lot better, and I think they could have played with higher intensity at the very start of the game.
It's a big test for Arsenal now in this second leg. A big test to their mentality, their ability to roll their sleeves up and go against the odds. Because let's be honest, and we've all heard it about the injuries, you know, and they've had it, you know, Saka's been out and he's been out, but they've used it as an excuse. Their title challenge to Liverpool's, it's embarrassing. I mean, they're double digits. Mm-hmm. So this is a big day for them. No excuses when they go to Paris. They know they're a good side. They know PSG are slick. It's time for these big players to turn up. Not more than about, oh, Kai Havertz is out. Is that making a big difference? Not really. Not really. Yeah, they missed Gabriel, but Kivier's actually done a good job for them. So it's a big test of this squad's mentality, if we've been honest about it, because their Premier League title race has been a damp squib. This has been their saving grace because they get knocked out of all the other cup competitions in England by poor sides. And if they go there and crumble, it's really not a good look on Mikel Arteta and the players.
So just to add to that point, we've seen though PSG crumble so many times in this position where they take an advantage into the second leg. Is there a different smell to this side this time around?
Absolutely, there is a different smell to this side. I look at this PSG team, and there is a different smell to this side compared to what this team was in the league phase.
Yeah, it's struggling against your own.
And it's really hard to understand and wrap your head around the fact that this is the same team that was struggling in the manner in which they were. So one would argue, well, what a job this has been from Luis Enrique. But the players themselves have picked up their level of play to the point to where we're talking about Vitinha in the manner in which we are, Joao Neves, Fabian Ruiz, players that we knew were good, but Vitinha has taken his game to a different level, and that's clear to see. Dembele has found a consistency that wasn't there. Due comes from who knows where, and so confident on the ball taking players on. Kvaratskhelia, who's a newly acquired player and has fit in as well as he has. And Donnarumma making saves. I think we kind of taken that for granted now. Donnarumma making saves in big moments, hasn't been the story of PSG in the past. In fact, he's been more likely to make mistakes. And think about playing against Real Madrid a few seasons ago, in which it was his mistake that allowed Real Madrid back into that match against PSG. He's coming up with big saves. And so we're trying to look for reasons as to why PSG are going to collapse. And actually, I'm trying to find difficulties coming up with reasons as to why Arsenal comes back. Right. Because we're still asking the same question that we were asking at the beginning of the season, middle of the season. Now we're getting towards the end of the season. Who's going to score the big goal for Arsenal? Yeah. That has been the question for years, and that hasn't been addressed. And if it's not a set piece, then where do the goals come from? Today they had 2 clear opportunities, Trossard and Martinelli. Donnarumma came up with the saves. But beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot that you can say, man.
It's almost like this desperation, we'll get a set piece and that'll do it.
And so the corner late in the match, and then at the stadium we decided, here's where the goal comes from. And the set piece coach comes up on the screen, and now he becomes the superstar of this team. The superstar of this team's got to be somebody who's scoring a big goal for this team in a game that matters, and that hasn't quite happened.
The trajectory of this side, though, has been quite amazing from the start of this season. Almost as equal as the sort of downward spiral that we saw from Man City. You know, when you're talking about, we didn't expect that. We didn't expect it from Man City. We didn't expect this from PSG. We just did not. There is a different smell about them. But there's also a slight concern if you think back to the at least 20 minutes in the second half against Aston Villa, where they lost their shape. Where they are not out of this company. Of course they're not. But they could have been against a side that were not fancied to go all the way in Aston Villa. Yes, they were at home, second leg. Villa, they got the crowd behind them and all that. But the chances Villa created were clear-cut. And this PSG side left themselves too wide open. And I hope for their sakes that they learn from that, because that's the one thing that could be detrimental to them. They'll probably outplay most teams. I mean, head-to-head with Barca, that would be close. But they'll probably outplay most teams. As long as they don't lose their shape and lose the ability to do the basics of the game defensively when in possession, they are going to be a tough nut to crack. But we did see a little bit of that at Villa Park. They got away with it on that occasion. We'll see what happens in the second leg. But I think at the moment, it's looking like, unless PSG crumble, then it's going to be a tough night in Paris for Arsenal.
If that's what you're asking, that's what you're hanging your hat on.
But you're not out of it.
No, most
absolutely
definitely.
1-0, and you're a good side.
But you're up against a proper team who aren't going to give you...
Absolutely a proper team.
Robert, how would you divvy this up percentage-wise?
I would say it's 80-20 in terms of 80% in terms of PSG, and the difference between them now and earlier on in the season is they've now got pace in the front areas, people that can go past people. Anybody that saw the game at the Emirates earlier on in the season, they passed it for fun but went nowhere with it. Now they've got players that can run with the ball. Now they've got pace to run at people and go past people. And that changes the whole way they pass the ball in midfield. And that's why the opposition can't press them quite so easily.
And if you've got Bukayo, and Kvaratskhelia was the same, Arsenal tried to crowd him out. It was crystal clear that whenever Bukayo Saka got the ball, he had the odd occasion he was one-on-one, but most of the time there was at least two around him, sometimes three. On those occasions, you have to be clever. You're not always going to beat a couple of players. You pop it off. If there's two defenders going out to you, there's got to be a spare man somewhere. So you've got to utilise the fact that your strength, and PSG have this as well, but they're a little bit more cute in doing it. When they see they're getting doubled up on, they pop it off. And I think when Bukayo Saka sees that happening to him, I think, right, I'm unlikely to beat these two or three, so there has to be spare men. We can start popping it off and there's going to be space there. That's where Arsenal have to be clever, because PSG are going to man-mark and double up on your biggest threat. And at the moment, Arsenal's biggest threat is the wide players, in particular Bukayo Saka.
80-20?
I'm not quite there yet. I'm going to say 60-40, and that's been kind.
Well, I'll split the difference.
70-30?
70-30. Yeah, no, I think another thing that I think is impressive about PSG, you're talking about doubling up. You have to have the players that are willing to do that job.
To do the work, yeah.
Yeah, so Kvaratskhelia coming back and helping. Due coming back and helping, knowing full well that if you're going to have this place interchange and player rotation that PSG likes to do, where Nuno Mendes appears somehow as the center forward at one point or another, somebody has to cover that. Somebody has to make that 50-yard sprint to be able to cover that space. And you see a lot of that going on from PSG. I'm going to say 70-30. PSG is a much different team than what we have seen in the past.
Robbo, I'm concerned with your attire. Are you okay? You look a bit sweaty. Do you need to have some sort of substitution, clothes change at half-time here?
No. I'm absolutely fine, Dan. It's very warm in England at the moment. It's
I can see.
It's about 30 degrees. So, it's pretty warm, but there we go.
I was kind of thinking that maybe you weren't supposed to be on tonight and you've just come off the rowing machine.
Oh, here we go. That's great. And, you come and do a job and you just get sick. Where's HR when you need them?
Oh, well, there we go. Lovely. All right, Robbo. Well, we'll stick with that.